Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be for you, wherever it is that you're joining us from today. Welcome and a big thank you for giving us some of your time. I know that time is the one resource that we all have a very limited amount of, and we appreciate the opportunity to have a little bit of your time to talk to you about enrolled agent exams and becoming an enrolled agent and how it is that HOCK International can help you do that. And what we're going to try to do is to present the information that we have as concisely and also as completely as possible. There are a couple of ways that you can ask questions as we're going through this. First, you can put it into the Q&A within Zoom. The chat feature isn't available, but there's a Q&A feature. And so we may answer some of those questions during the webinar, but if not, we'll come to the end at the second chance that you have to answer or to ask your questions at the end of the webinar. We won't stay until all of the questions have been asked because sometimes that may go on much longer than anybody really wants to stay. But as always, if you have any questions after the webinar, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at HOCK. We'll be happy to answer your questions by email or whatever it is that we can do to answer those questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start as a bit of an introduction to all of this, and a lot of the presentation today is going to be given by Nicole. And as you can see on Zoom, Nicole has the letters EA after her name, and I don't have the letters EA after my name. And so Nicole's an ideal person to share this information today and talk about what it is that is an EA and what it means to be an EA and all of that, those opportunities that exist for enrolled agents going forward. Just as a way of introduction, our agenda for the day, we're going to talk about the EA credential. We're going to talk about what it is that enrolled agents are authorized to do. Who is it that kind of the EA is for? Who it is that are those kind of people that will benefit from it? We'll talk, and this is a very important part, about what does EA mean in the real world? What is it that people are able to do once you pass the exam and you become an enrolled agent? What is it that you're able to do? We'll talk a little bit about the exam content and the exam structure, a little bit about the registration process and the requirements. We don't want to spend a lot of time on that because that's just kind of basic factual information that is available in other places, and you can get that to the detail you need yourself. We'll talk about the study process, the cost involved in becoming an enrolled agent, and then finally how it is that we at HOCK are able to help you do that. So we'll start with an introduction. There will be two of us who will be speaking. My name is Brian HOCK. If you didn't know that, I'm the founder and the CEO of HOCK International, and we are celebrating our 25th year as a company, helping people pass their exams. I believe this is our fourth exam cycle coming up with enrolled agent, and so we don't have 25 years of experiences within the enrolled agent exam, but we've certainly been doing this for a long time. I'll spend a little more time introducing Nicole because Nicole's the one who actually is an EA, as I said, and is the one who will be talking to you. Nicole's an experienced tax professional based in New York State, not New York City. I don't know if that's an important distinction for her to make, but in New York State, but not in New York City. She has a bachelor's degree from the University of Maryland at College Park and is, most importantly here for us today, an enrolled agent. And that means that she is authorized to represent taxpayers before the IRS. She is able to stand in the place of the taxpayers in the discussions with the IRS, and I'll let Nicole talk more about that here in a little bit. But this is what Nicole does now from a tax perspective. She helps her clients navigate that whole tax scenario, that whole resolution process when there's an issue that has been raised by the IRS, whether it's something that the taxpayer did incorrectly, an honest mistake, not really a mistake, just a misunderstanding. And so Nicole uses her expertise in that area of tax representation. Some of you may have seen or met Nicole. She also does our EA study sessions that we run. And so if you're here and you've already started studying, you may know Nicole from that. If you haven't done that yet, but you start studying with HOCK, I'm sure you'll see Nicole in those sessions that we do as well. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed in my talking with Nicole, as I have, is she's able to take that tax situation and make it understandable. I know that sometimes I just had an experience. I looked at a tax form and had absolutely no idea myself what needed to be done with it. And when I've talked with Nicole about various topics, she's always able to make it something that I'm able to understand and kind of take out all of that tax element of it and make it something that's a lot more understandable and practical for all of us. And so Nicole will be taking over the presentation here in a little bit from me, but I've got a little bit of kind of more clerical work or just kind of informational that I'll talk about before I hand the microphone to Nicole. I want to start by talking about just the EA, what it is and what it means. Enrolled agents are licensed directly by the United States Department of the Treasury, which is the Internal Revenue Service, or the IRS, and that's the tax body for the United States government. When I fill out my tax return as an individual, a company fills out a return, that's going to the IRS. And when the IRS looks at your tax return and has questions about it, it's the IRS that will be responding to the taxpayer to clarify any questions or anything like that. And so the enrolled agent exam is coming from the tax authorities, the taxation body in the United States. No other tax representatives have this type of federal license with it. Enrolled agents are really America's tax experts, and this is something that I can speak from both the standpoint of a CPA and an enrolled agent. I can't do it from an attorney standpoint because I'm not an attorney. But I took the CPA exam many years ago. I've been involved with the CPA exam, continue to be involved with the CPA exam. So I know what the CPA exam tests for taxation. And now I know what the enrolled agent exam tests in respect to taxation. And somebody who's an enrolled agent would be able to pass the CPA taxation sections, but somebody who takes their knowledge from the CPA exam would not be in a position to pass the enrolled agent exams. The enrolled agents exam go into more detail, more depth. And so when we're looking for somebody who is an expert in taxation, it's the enrolled agents that have that most thorough and comprehensive examination process to get their designation. And so when we're talking about representing clients to the IRS and working with the IRS, enrolled agents have the same rights and responsibilities that CPAs have and that attorneys have. And so this is something that I'll talk a little bit about here next, and I'm sure Nicole will touch on this going forward. But the question really becomes, what is it that enrolled agents are authorized to do? What is it that you can do as an enrolled agent that you cannot do as somebody who's not a CPA or an attorney? And it really comes down to the right to represent a taxpayer. And so I'll make up a completely hypothetical situation to demonstrate this. But let's assume that I file my taxes, and let's assume that I hire somebody to do it for me. And so me and that other person prepare my taxes and we send it to the IRS. And a few months later, I get a letter from the IRS that says, Brian, we have some questions about your return. We need some more information. Now, at that point, Nicole has not been involved with me at all. She will say doesn't know who I am. She was not involved in preparing my return. She was not involved in that submission of the return to the IRS. But I am able to call Nicole and say, Nicole, I have some questions from the IRS. Can you represent me? And Nicole, as an enrolled agent, is able to take me on as a client, as a tax representation client, and she is able to carry on those discussions with the IRS on my behalf. If Nicole is not an enrolled agent, if she is not a CPA and she's not an attorney, that is not possible. And so somebody can be a tax preparer and they can prepare tax returns, but they aren't able to represent other taxpayers in front of the IRS. And so that's the main distinction of what an enrolled agent is able to do. And as we'll talk about, this is the value that comes from being an enrolled agent. You are able to do things that other people aren't able to do. The person who prepared your taxes may not be able to represent you. And so this whole process of preparing tax returns, providing advice, going through that audit or appeal process, if that is something that arises, that is what it is that enrolled agents are able to do. And this is something that I think it's important to kind of understand at the very beginning, what it is that you will be able to do as an enrolled agent that you can't do without being an enrolled agent. Now, we'll also talk, and Nicole will talk about this, I think, in the next slide, that being an enrolled agent will help you get other jobs. If you're looking to go into the tax profession, being an enrolled agent will absolutely help you get that job, because Clearly, if I'm running a tax firm, I would prefer to hire somebody who has enrolled agent as opposed to somebody who doesn't. But this is where I'm going to turn the presentation over to Nicole. And so, Nicole, I hope everything that I said was accurate and doesn't, and you don't have to spend the first few minutes clarifying or taking back something that I said. But welcome, Nicole. It's been a pleasure to work with you in our enrolled agent materials, and I know you're doing a great job helping the students pass the exam. And so with this, I will turn myself off and keep the slides going for you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. Everything you said was exactly true. So we're just going to go right off of that. And one thing that a lot of new tax professionals and even, well, mostly taxpayers, right? They're intimidated by the IRS. They don't file their taxes for several years because they can't pay the taxes due. So rather than deal with it, or they don't, right? They just let it go and hope that nobody realizes that they are unfiled and owe back taxes. But something that most people, tax professionals included, don't realize is that the IRS is actually fairly easy to work with when it comes to paying back taxes. And the reason why is because the IRS wants taxpayers to become compliant, and they want to make it as easy as possible. I know that sounds like an oxymoron if you've ever worked with taxes or people with unpaid taxes, but the IRS actually wants taxpayers to be tax compliant. So in order to get somebody tax compliant, they have to get the taxpayers' back taxes filed, paid, and on track to become compliant going forward, right? So that's something that an EA can help taxpayers do, and it's a great benefit to your clients. It's a great benefit on your resume. It's something that's very easily achievable, and we're going to go through how and why becoming an EA could be the right move for you. So on this slide, we're going to talk about who should pursue the EA designation, right? Tax preparers ready to boost skills and authority. So if you're already a tax preparer, you're already preparing tax returns, and you pursue the EA credential, you can now give your taxpayer that peace of mind that they're not going to face the IRS alone should something arise. Also, if something arises, you're able to handle it, right? If you're a tax preparer and you're not an EA and you've done everything correctly by preparing the tax return, submitting it to the IRS, you sat with your client, you got all the documentations, and you did everything 100% correct. 6 months after you file the return, and I think Brian even hit on this, your taxpayer receives a letter. They bring it into your office. If you're not an EA, that's the extent that you can help them. You did everything correctly, but now you aren't able to help them with this notice that they received. And this notice can be as simple as a phone call to the IRS that you are able to make, settle it for your client, and it goes no further than one phone call, and then give your client a peace of mind. But you have to have that EA credential to be able to offer that to your client. Bookkeepers, accountants, expanding into the tax advisory and representation world, great opportunity. You're currently a bookkeeper, you're currently an accountant, but you want to do more. You want to offer more. You want to get into resolution. Perfect opportunity is by taking the EA exam. And I will show you and tell you stories as to how that can help you as well. Career changers with financial administrative or legal backgrounds, perfect opportunity. If you are working, even if you're not, even if you want a complete overhaul of your career, this is a great profession to get into. It's a growing, respectable profession, and we're going to show you how you can achieve it by taking a 3-part exam, studying for the exam, taking the 3-part exam, and getting licensed with the IRS. And as Brian mentioned, EAs are licensed by the U.S. Department of Treasury specifically to represent taxpayers before the IRS. And they hold that title exclusively. They are federally authorized to represent taxpayers before the IRS in all tax matters. Self-employed professionals looking to stand out. This is great. You add EA to your resume. It is a great distinction, and it shows your clients as well as potential employers that you are able to work directly with the IRS on behalf of their clients or your clients if you're self-employed. Now, these last two bullet points we're going to talk a little bit more about. So the first bullet point is seasoned tax pros turning part-time work into full-time career, or even full-time tax professionals, right? And I hit on this when we talked about the first bullet, but and I'll just reiterate it here again, but as a seasoned tax pro, by becoming an EA, you can offer a lot more. You can offer more to your clients, right? You can go with them through examinations, audits, responding to IRS letters. So there's so much more that you can give them. And as I mentioned in the first bullet, you give them a peace of mind that they are not facing the IRS alone. That because taxpayers and a lot of people are, but I don't want to say scared of the IRS, right? But they are, for lack of better words, they are scared of the IRS, right? So it really gives your taxpayers a peace of mind. And then the last bullet is for people who aren't currently doing tax returns, right? To become an EA, you don't need prior tax experience and you don't need a college degree. You just need to be 18 years old. 18 years old, get a good study guide like HOCK International, go through the program and pass the 3-part exam. And we're going to go through that. So that is who should pursue the EA credential and how it's beneficial to you. So career impact and real world value, which we touched on a little bit in the previous slide. But as we mentioned, it's a federal license with nationwide practice, right? So you can represent your clients in the United States. You can also live abroad and represent your clients in the United States. You can also represent non-US citizens who have to file tax returns, right? Because a lot of non-US citizens or non-US resident aliens have to file tax returns. You can assist these types of taxpayers, whether it's US citizens living abroad or non-US citizens living in the United States or having to file US tax returns. You're able to represent these clients in front of the IRS. EAs typically earn more than uncredentialed tax preparers. You have another designation, and with that designation, you have more authority. And with more authority, you have more opportunity and a higher income because you have a lot more that you can offer your taxpayers. A lot of EAs open their own tax resolution or boutique firms. You can either work for a tax firm and then decide to go out on your own. And when you go out on your own, you're going to be able to want to represent clients before the IRS, right? Now, even if you don't want to be your own boss or open your own shop, EAs and tax preparers, right? We know that this profession is recession resistant, right? We know you have to file your taxes regardless of what's going on in the world, right? So if you don't want to be your own boss or open your own tax firm, EAs are in very high demand in tax firms, law offices, CPA firms, payroll providers, and having the EA status adds credibility, right? You put it on your resume and it goes without saying anything more. You have that EA designation on your resume. Now you're dealing with CPA firms and tax firms. They know what that means. They know what you can do for your client. Okay. All right. So this is how you achieve the EA designation. Like Brian said, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on here, but it is very achievable. It is a 3-part test. Each test has 100 questions. My recommendation is to study one part at a time so that you focus on that part and pass that test. You do however you work and what's comfortable with you. Most tax, it depends on what test to start with, right? I started with the first test and went 1, 2, and 3. A lot of people go 1, 2, and 3 in order. You don't have to take the test in order. So if you were a seasoned tax preparer and you have been doing taxes for 15 years and you're very comfortable with tax returns, you might want to start with part 1, because part 1 is individual tax returns, and it breaks down there in the bullet points what you're tested on. So if you're comfortable with self-employment income, Form 1040, and the schedules, right, then you're going to want to start with part 1, get it under your belt. If you're new to the tax world and are changing professions, you might want to start with part 1 or part 3. Part 3 is statistically the easiest test to pass, pardon me. It's passed 80% on the first try by most test takers, right? So 80% pass rate on part 3. So if you haven't touched a tax return, or you're, like I said, you're just changing careers, a lot of people start with part 3, because you get a feel for what, and especially those who may or may not have test anxiety, you start with an easier test or something to get under your belt, right? So you know what to expect when you go to the testing site. It can be a little bit intimidating. Even if you don't have test taking anxiety, it can be a little bit intimidating. So once you study and you have the knowledge under your belt, it's not as intimidating. And you can take, like I said, either part 1 or part 3. That's basically how people do it. The bold and those who are very, very comfortable with business returns do start with part 2 first. Some people in the study sessions have noted that they start with part 2 because they want to get the hardest one out of the way first. So whatever your mindset is, it's 3 tests, 100 questions per test, and it's very doable, very doable. And then here are some of the requirements and registration process. As we mentioned, there's no prerequisite to take the exam. You don't need a college degree. You don't need prior tax experience. You just need to be 18 years old. You have to obtain a PTIN number, which is a preparer tax identification number, before applying to take the test, right? So that's easy to do on the IRS website. You just apply for a PTIN number. A PTIN number is a number, it's 8 digits and a P in the front, right? So it's P and then 8 digits. And that's your number that when you're doing tax returns, you put that on every single tax return. When you become an EA and you take continuing education credits, you put that PTIN there, and the continuing education provider will report your continuing education to the IRS. So that PTIN number is like your identification number. You're going to register for the exam through Prometric's website, which is listed there. The fee is $267 per part, and that's in 2025. So you have to pay that exam fee every time you take the exam. The other thing I want to mention about Prometric's website is they also have a simulated test. So going back to when I was talking about the anxiety, or if you just want a peace of mind when you take the test, Prometrics has a simulated test. So you can take an exam prior to not taking an exam, but it simulates the exam. HOCK International has a mock exam. And I say this during my study classes, I highly recommend when you're ready to take the exam, to take the mock exam. And it simulates the actual exam at the Prometric site. So you set yourself up to know exactly what you're going to be in store for when you go take the actual exam. And then once you pass all 3 parts, you have a 3-year window to pass it. So that when you take that first exam, that date that you take that first exam, you now have 3 years from that date to finish the other 2 exams. They all have to be passed within that 3-year window. Doesn't count your study period or when you sign up for HOCK International, right? You can study for as long as you want. But once you take that first test, you have that 3 years to complete the other 2 without having to take that first test again, okay? After you pass those 3 parts, You fill out Form 23 with the IRS, which is basically an application for enrollment. You're applying to be an EA. I've passed all 3 exams. I'm applying to be an EA. It's $140 for the enrollment fee. And then the IRS does run a tax compliant and background check with the IRS. They want to make sure that you have your personal tax returns filed and you are in tax compliance. This is just a baseline. This is by no means what everyone does and what you have to do, but many candidates do complete all 3 parts within 3 to 6 months. Again, this is going to be based on your time schedule and how much time you can devote to studying, right? A lot of people are full-time tax preparers or full-time professionals looking for a career change. So they study on their part-time or on their off hours, and it's 100% doable that way. Some people can study the full day, right? So your time period will fluctuate a little bit based on your own personal time commitment. Some people 3 to 6 months, some people up to 12 months, depend upon your schedule. Some people do it longer. Again, you can study for as long as you want. You just have to take those 3 tests within that 3-year window without having to repeat a test. Part 1, this again is just standard 60 to 80 hours of studying. Generally will get you a passing score on the test. You can take the test 4 times. If you fail it 4 times within a testing cycle, right? We don't expect you to fail 4 times, but if you do, or that one time to get it under your belt to see where you're missing, what you're lacking, you do have additional times to take that test. Part 2, which is statistically the hardest test, 100 to 120 hours. I think it's also the biggest book, right? When we're studying part 2. And part 3, as I mentioned before, is passed by 80% or more on their first try. That's why a lot of people try to do or want to do part 3 first. 40 to 60 hours of study time. The PTIN, as I mentioned, that you get right on the IRS website is $19.75. The exam we talked about is $267 that you pay to Prometrics. And then the enrollment fee is your application fee to the IRS to apply for your EA license. And then the study materials, and we're going to talk next about the study materials.
Well, I will take over and do that. Thank you very much, Nicole. I know that you've been speaking there for a little while, and so now that we're coming back to the content, I'll be happy to share about that. I do want to echo a couple of things that Nicole said, just in terms of how it is that people take the exams. Absolutely, I encourage people to take one exam at a time. I know that if you have to travel to take your exam, there may be a reason to do that. But even if your goal is to take the exams as quickly as possible and to complete as quickly as possible, I don't really think that studying for multiple exams at the same time makes it go any faster. It just makes it a little bit harder because you have to remember more information at the same time. And that $267 fee is each time you take it. And so if you think I'm going to take all 3 because I'm going to do it faster, and if that causes you to fail even one of them, you have to pay that fee again as well. And so that's just kind of something in managing that. And also in terms of taking the order of taking the exams, just to reiterate that it is a choice. They don't build on each other. And so it's not like part 2 takes what you learned in part 1 and makes it more advanced or something like that. They are distinct and separate syllabuses. And so you don't have to do one before another.
Absolutely. You can pick whichever,
Right.
just to jump in as well, you can pick whichever exam that suits you. Like I said, based on your comfortability or your experience. The only recommendation I do make, because you can start with 1 or 3 or 2, you can start with any one, is there is a little bit of, there are a handful of topics that are covered in both part 1 and part 2. But they're different, right? So if one part you're talking about the individuals, you might be talking about the exact same thing, but you're now talking about it from the entity standpoint when you're doing the business return. So like Brian said, if you study both of those together and you go to take that test together, it's going to be difficult to keep track of is this what I learned in part one? Is this what I learned in part two? So it is recommended to study one test at a time to not get confused with some of those overlapping topics because they're testing you on two different things.
Yeah. So the question that we're leading all of this up to is, how do we study? How do we learn all of this information? And this comes down to the study materials that we have available. We have a subscription model for our enrolled agent. And so we sometimes get the question, what is the cost of studying for EA? And the answer in terms of the study materials comes down to essentially how quickly do you plan on going through all of the exams. We know that we have some people that are experienced tax professionals and they study less than a month for one of the parts and they just kind of need to refresh their memory. And some people may take 10 months or 12 months to do it. But we have two options. One is called the premium and one is called the standard. Obviously, there's a price difference. We have a 40% discount right now on our subscriptions, which makes it essentially $50 for the premium and $30 for the standard. And really, there's two differences between them, and that is that the premium includes an online textbook, and the premium includes 3 mock exams for each part, so a total of 9 mock exams. Having said that, what you have in the standard is really not as much as you would like to have to be able to prepare, but that textbook and those mock exams are available in hard copies from Amazon in some countries. And so if you're in the United States and you've already purchased or you would prefer to purchase hard copies, you can purchase the hard copies of the textbook and the hard copies of the mock exams from Amazon. In which case, if you've already purchased those from Amazon, you don't need to subscribe to those every month from us. And so the standard is what's available for individuals who have or are going to purchase the HOCK Passkey books from Amazon. Included for everybody, we have over 2,800 multiple choice questions. There are more than 70 hours of videos that are featuring Christy. And I know that everyone who's had the pleasure of watching the videos with Christy enjoys and really thinks very highly of those videos in terms of helping them prepare for the exams. We have a system that kind of lays out your studying for you with our pass map system. I won't demonstrate it here, but you go in and you say what date it is that you're going to take your exam, and it takes all of those individual study units and tells you when you need to begin each of those study units so that you're ready to take your exam on, August 8th or whatever day it is you're planning to take your exam. We have a forum. You can ask questions, and Nicole and Christy answer the questions on the forum as you go through. If there's something that isn't clear, there's an example that you're not quite certain about, you're able to ask those questions on the forum, and we're happy to answer those questions. And as I mentioned earlier, we have some weekly live sessions that Nicole runs where she goes through questions and kind of does a deep dive into the questions as to why it is that the correct answer is correct. And sometimes just as importantly, why the incorrect answer is not correct. Because I always say in a lot of these questions, when you look at the incorrect answers, those are all learning opportunities. There may be something that you could change in the question to make one of those incorrect answers become the correct answer. And so those sessions are a good chance to interact and to get that kind of live interaction going through the questions and learning some of that strategy. All of our subscriptions start with a 3-day free trial. And so you sign up, you do enter your card information, but you have 3 days before it's going to be charged. And so if you cancel at any time, you don't get charged. And we do that because we want you to see the materials to make certain that they're going to be good for you. We're very confident in them. We think that they're the best in the market, but that's something that you need to make as a decision yourself. And so we have that free trial available to go through the materials. And that free trial includes everything. You get all of the videos, you get all of the, the online textbook if you've signed up for the premium, you get the access to the mock exams if you signed up for the premium. All of those, the whole system is available for you as part of that free trial. There was one more thing I wanted to mention, but I don't remember what that was. The materials that we have are complete. It's all that you need. You don't need to go out and purchase another test bank. You don't need to go out and do additional reading and studying. And also the subscription includes access to all three parts. And so when you sign up, you get access to the materials for part one, part two, and part three. And this actually makes it a lot easier for you because it's very likely that you will take part one kind of in the middle of a subscription period, in the middle of a month. And so you don't have to worry about closing a subscription and starting a new subscription. You will just continue to go through with your studies as you transition from whichever part you take first. I was going to say part one to part two to part three, but that may not be the way in which you do it. And so this wraps up everything it is that we had in terms of the specific information that we wanted to share with you. And so thank you very much again for your attendance. We will stay here and answer some questions. If you can put them into the Q&A in Zoom, Nicole and I will kind of talk about them as we need to. I know that some of them we've already been answering as the webinar has been going on, and so I'm not certain. We have a few that are left. One of the questions has to do with printing the textbook, printing the online textbook. That's a security feature. That's kind of what helps us protect our IP. And so in many countries, the hard copy is available through Amazon. And if you really need a hard copy, that's the way to get it, in which case you can also then order the hard copies of the question bank that has the mock exams in it. And you don't have to make the premium subscription. You're able to save the money and get the standard subscription. And so that's the way that the hard copies work. There's a question, Nicole, and I'll leave this one to you to kind of recap. I know we talked about it earlier. The difference between EAs and, well, actually, I'll take this now that I read the question. The difference between EA and other accounting licenses. The difference is very simple. EA covers U.S. taxation. Full stop. That's it. There's no financial accounting. There's no auditing. There's no management accounting. There's no finance. There's nothing other than U.S. taxation. There's no foreign other country taxation. That's all it is. And so if you are not looking to become a tax preparer or a tax representative, EA's probably not for you, because that's all it tests. The other accounting certifications like CPA, there is a tax element within the CPA exam. But as I mentioned earlier, the depth of testing of taxation and other certifications is much, much less than it is within the enrolled agent exam. And so enrolled agent is simply U.S. taxation. That's it. And that's what makes it different from other tax certification or other accounting related certifications. CMA, if you're a CMA, you're not able to represent and practice before the IRS. Okay, CPAs you can, ACCA you can't. Other accounting certifications don't have that same benefit. And so that's the difference between EA and other accounting licenses. There's a question about testing season. Nicole, I'll let you answer that one.
Yep. So as I mentioned, you have a 3-year time once you take the first test to pass the third test. However, the testing cycle is from May 1st to the last day of February 28th typically, but last year was February 29th. So it's May 1st to February 29th. And then there's no testing in March or April because we change over the test material, right? So if you sign up today and you study today, you will be studying for 2024 tax returns. And you can test all the way until February 28th, 2026 on that 2024 material. If you keep your subscription, the textbooks are updated, and then you will have access to the new material once it becomes available for that May 1st testing cycle next year. So the testing cycle, in short, Jessica, to answer your question, is from May 1st to the last day of February 28th. And then you have 3 years. I'm sorry.
No, and this is something too connected to this. People ask, does the material change from one year to the next? And the answer to that is yes, but we never know how much because it's based on what tax law is passed. And so right now, we know what is tested on the EA exam because it was the tax law from December 31st of 2024. We don't know what changes there will be until next year for next year's EA exam until the end of 2025 and sometimes even into 2026. It depends on what tax changes are passed by the US government. And so if there are significant tax changes during the course of the year, then next year's enrolled agent exam will look very different than this year's in terms of the amounts. I don't think the overall tax structure will change, but some of the elements of it will. If the tax code doesn't go through significant changes, then a lot of the updates are just amounts that are inflation adjusted go up. You know, it was 1,200 last year, it becomes 1,300 next year. But those specific amounts aren't really tested in terms of how much is this deduction. And so it's something that does change. One of the things, if you're starting your EA journey right now, it's very possible you'll be done with all three parts before the end of February. That you can set that as a realistic, reasonable goal to be done before the exam changes.
Mhm.
If you start with parts 1 and part 2 and you're left with part 3 is the part of the exam that usually changes the least. And so if you finish parts 1 and part 2 in this testing session and you leave part 3 to study as the exam changes from one year to the next, that's probably the exam that will have the fewest amount of changes and would be the easiest to be the first exam to, or the last exam for you to take when the new window opens next May. But like I said, if you're starting today, I would encourage you to have the mindset that you are going to pass all three parts before the end of February. Now, if we get to November, December, and you realize that's not going to be the case, then try to get parts 1 and part 2 done before the end of February and leave part 3 then for the beginning of May to finish that off and be ready to take that in May.
Just going off what Brian just said, also Christy does a tax update in the videos. So if you have the 2024 book and you're not going to get through it and test, like Brian just said, and you're going to take that last test in May, Christy gives you a video of all the tax updates, what has changed from 2024 to 2025. So you have access to that once that video is in the library. So that'll help you bridge one tax year to the other. And then until, if you only have that last test hanging on, that should be sufficient. And then if not, you're going to want to, you have access to the new materials as well.
We have a couple of questions kind of about geography. So
Yep.
I will answer one, Nicole, and I will let you answer the other one. The first question is, do we provide any international taxation training for expats who have to file taxes in multiple countries? The answer to that is no. We do the EA, which is connected with filing your taxes in the US. Now, part of that is if you are living abroad outside the US and you have to file US taxes, that is covered in the EA exam, but only from the standpoint of the taxes that are due to the US. We don't have anything that covers your tax situation in whatever country it is that you're resident. The other question, and Christy, this is for you, does an EA certification allow you to file for any state without additional certifications, or are there some states that require additional certifications?
So as in the question, Oregon State, Oregon just passed that you have to have a certification with Oregon. So it's actually very, very strict, and it's the strictest guidelines that we've seen. You have to have this you have to have this Oregon certification just to even input data for an Oregon return. So this is something that just really hit the industry. And there's a test that you can take, and it's 100 questions. I'm actually scheduled to take it because I do have some representation clients in Oregon, but it is another test that you have to take, and it's only specifically for Oregon. Taking Oregon out of the mix, in EA, you can file taxes, all IRS taxes, California also has a designation, California tax preparer, CTEC requirement as well. But Oregon is the strictest, and because you put it in your question, yeah, you do have to have authorization in Oregon to file Oregon state taxes.
Okay, another question that I'm going to give to you, Nicole. The person's been preparing taxes for 5 years, plan to start their own company after passing the EA. Should they start their process now for the EFIN or wait until they pass the test?
I would, it depends. If you're currently working for a company, if you're gonna go out on your own and start filing taxes on your own prior to getting your authorization, your EA authorization, then yes, you have to start the process now for an EFIN. If you're going to stay at your company while you're studying and passing the test, then enroll in the program, pass your test, and then once you're ready to go out on your own, you can then start the process on your EFIN.
How long does it take to get an EFIN? Because I remember, I think when I got my PTIN, it was hours, a day or something. And so is an EFIN a quick process, or does it drag out?
It's a little bit
Okay.
longer than getting the PTIN. So it is a process you're going to want to start. And like I said, if you're going to leave your company and prepare tax returns on your own while you're studying, then absolutely you have to get the EFIN. But if you're going to stay where you are, you can do that later and focus on, not that it takes away from your focus, but you can just do that at a later time when you're ready to take that next step. So this is, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was looking on to the next question, but go
Oh,
ahead. Did you
if I
want?
was going to ask about CE.
So this is great because in the class, I was surprised to hear that someone thought that they had to take the exam every 3 years to keep their license, and that's not the case. And so it makes it a little bit more digestible, if you will. So think of the test not as a test, but as a career investment, right? So now you're investing in your career. You take the exam, all three parts, you apply for your enrollment, you get your enrollment. Now you're an enrolled agent. What do you have to do to keep that status? Well, you renew every 3 years, and when you renew on that third year, you have to have 72 hours of continuing education and 6 hours in those 72 hours, you have to have 6 hours of ethics. So it's recommended 72 divided by 3, right? It's recommended that you get 24 CE credits a year to being ethics credits. You only have to, with your PTIN, get 16 a year. And I see this every year, a lot of tax preparers and EAs only get that 16 credits. And when they come to renew, they're short. And then there's a mad dash to get those CE credits that last month. All of a sudden, you have to get 30 credits. So you don't have to retake the test. Once you take the test, you have the designation. Now you just have to keep up with your CE. And it's really just 2 CE a month if you look at it, right? It's a 100-minute course. They're available online, in person. Someone mentioned international. You can go to an international conference and pick up all 24 CE. You can also, the IRS has tax forums. So each year they have 4 cities. This year, I think it's New Orleans, Orlando, Baltimore, and San Diego. And they put on a 3-day, just the IRS puts on a 3-day CE session where you can get all your CE in one shot. And it's also a great networking opportunity because tons of EAs are there, CPAs, tax attorneys. You'll just meet all kinds of people, and then you can interact with the IRS as well. So yeah, you just have to keep up with your continuing education.
Kind of building on that, somebody asked a question, and I think it was answered about courses for filling out the forms. And this connects a little bit with CE. This is something that we don't currently have, but I expect that in the next couple of months, we will start having these courses that are both CE and also the guidance to go through the forms and information about filling out the forms, because I know it's not always as simple or as clear as we think it should be. And so that's something that we will have more information coming out soon. Somebody's asked a question about the value of EA in this world of AI. And so I'll say something quickly, and then Nicole, if you want to agree or disagree with me or share a different perspective. My feeling is that this is something that AI is not going to impact in terms of eliminating the need for enrolled agents and representation. AI may provide people with more tools to get the information to do the representation and to find out what the numbers are, what the numbers should be. But when we talk about tax work, not tax preparation necessarily, but the tax representation and tax strategy and planning, I'm not at the point yet where I'm going to let AI do that for me. That's something that I want to have a person that can bring experience from situations that I may not tell AI to consider. And so I don't think that that level of tax representation, tax strategy, tax planning is going to be negatively impacted by AI. Data entry might be, just in terms of the data entry process of putting information in. Nicole, is that how you would see it or differently?
Absolutely. And when you're dealing with the IRS, first of all, your client's case is going to be specific. I mean, there's a lot of boilerplate, if you will, installment agreements. Installment agreements, in case you don't know, is a payment plan with the IRS. So when the taxpayer can't pay their tax liability in full, the IRS will give you a payment plan, and it's called an installment agreement. So it's going to be specific to your client. AI will absolutely aid tax professionals. There's a lot of courses out there that's going to aid you, but it cannot take away what you do and what you offer to your client. You have to have that designation. You're the one, it's not the AI, who is working with the IRS. You're speaking with them, you're writing letters, you're advocating for your client. That's you. So you can get assistance with letter writing and things like that from AI, but you need the authorization and the credential to speak and work with the IRS. So I don't think that it will help us, but it's not going to eliminate us, like Brian said, and it's not going to take anything away from us that other than data entry, letter writing, things that we may not have the time to dedicate to as an EA, because we're dealing with examinations and audits and appeals. So that's my take on it as well.
Nicole, there's a question about a person has experience in the valuation area. Can EA help expanding horizon? Is EA going to help provide more offerings to clients? I mean, without knowing all the details, I would say yes, because it's another offering. Nicole, is that?
I agree. It's a designation, and as an EA, you can step into your client's shoes, right? You can act on their behalf in front of the IRS. So you have complete authorization once you go through the proper channels to obtain that from your client. You now can represent them in front of all branches of the IRS. So I can't see how it couldn't aid.
Right. It's something too that it's interesting. I was talking to somebody who is a certified financial planner, a CFP, and they were looking at EA as, in addition to then providing that financial advice to a client, they would then also be able to provide tax representation or do tax work. And so I think it's not only valuation. I think anything where you're working with clients in a financial capacity and investment capacity, and there may be some tax implications or tax it touches on tax, then being able to say you're an EA is clearly going to help differentiate yourself. Because we all know there's tax implications with investments and property, and being able to say, I'm going to understand what those tax implications are. So I'm not going to give you a piece of advice that helps over here, but leaves you with a huge tax bill 10 years down the line or something like that. And so I think there's a lot of areas where being an EA supplements and adds value to what it is that you're doing.
Absolutely.
CPA, somebody asked if you have EA and CPA, what are the requirements for CE? Basically, if you have multiple certifications, it's most likely that doing the CE for one will meet the others. You may have to match that up a little bit in that if EA, you have to do a lot of tax for EA, where CPA doesn't have to be tax. So you'll want to do your tax CE for EA, but that will also meet your CPA. So if you, whether it's CPA, CMA, whatever multiple certifications you have, if you pay attention as you do your continuing education, you should be able to meet both of them with the same 40 hours or whatever the highest requirement you have is. Yes, you can complete EA after doing CMA. Absolutely. There's another question that I'll touch on briefly about international candidates. What is the value? That is a very good question, especially if you're outside the US and looking to do this. I know that in India, there are a large number of accounting firms that are hiring back office EA tax preparation work. And so there is a growing amount of demand for tax preparers and enrolled agents outside the United States. I know a lot of that is concentrated in India. I know the big four and accounting firms are hiring enrolled agents. And so depending on where you are, if that tax work is being outsourced to your country, there would certainly be opportunities for you as an EA.
All right, Victor asked, he's passed part 1 already, planning to take part 2 soon. Is 1 month good enough study time? What do you recommend? If your study, it's hard to say not knowing your experience and where you are in the testing cycle. So what we tell HOCK International subscribers are sit for the mock exam. Sit for the mock exam and see how you score. That will be your best indicator to see if you're ready for the test. And I say, once you sit for that mock exam and you're solid, 80 or above, solid. Not you scrape by with the 80 or above, but you're solid on that score, you can be comfortable scheduling that exam.
We're almost done. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through a couple of questions that have already been asked, and then I'm going to say thank you to everybody, and we'll be done at that time. In terms of the demand for EAs in Asia and China, I don't know. I'm assuming it's not as high as it is in India, but that may simply be because I'm not aware of it. About getting a job, think in terms of getting a job, be open-minded in what you see as the opportunities. Don't consider Intuit the only option or the big four. Local audit firms, local tax firms, there's a lot of people that are out there doing tax work locally that you can connect with personally. And so don't just have in mind the big firms and the big opportunities. There's a lot of other ones as well. I don't have any shortcuts to getting CPA. You still have to take all the exams. In terms of best practices and setting up a business, this is something that we're in the early stages of seeing if we want to get into this in terms of providing some courses about that and some guidance in that. Right now, we don't, but that may be something that in the future we start to provide a little guidance with. If we didn't answer your question, please send it to us by email, support@hockinternational.com. We'll get your questions and we'll answer them. Thank you very, very much for everyone who is still with us. This will go out as a recording. You'll be able to watch any parts that you missed or that you thought Nicole was particularly insightful about. I know it'll be those parts. So thank you very much, Nicole. I have a suspicion in my mind I referred to you as Christy once during this, if not more than once. I apologize if I did.
Take it as a compliment.
Yeah. But thank you very much, Nicole, for all of your contribution to this and all of your contribution to our classes and content and getting people through the exam. If you are in the process, we look forward to helping you finish your enrolled agent process. If you haven't started yet, we look forward to helping you begin and complete that journey. And so thank you very, very much, everyone. Thank you, Nicole, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.